Hey guys, so usually I'll wait a few weeks before doing a review, but the purpose of the review is simple. It's whether I think a smartphone is worth buying or not. Now I've only owned the Xperia X for a little under a week, but I already feel I have the answer to that question, so let's go ahead and get started. Now I'm going to start with a brief overview and then the things I like about it and dislike about it. So first for the brief overview, this has a 5-inch LCD 1080p screen display. On the rear you'll find a 23 megapixel camera, and on the front is an impressive 13 megapixel camera. Internally you have a Snapdragon 650 with 3GB of RAM. The version I have is 64GB internal storage. There's also a 32GB version. It does have micro SD card support up to 200GB. Now it's worth noting that it does have a fingerprint scanner, but for the US version it does not. And that's definitely a huge downside because in 2016 all smartphones should have fingerprint scanners, at least for a smartphone that costs this much money. The battery is 2620 mAh capacity. It has quick charge 2.0, micro USB, so it does not have USB Type-C. And then this is running Android Marshmallow. Now I've reset it to the factory settings so you guys can see what it looks like when you first get it. Now let's talk about things I do like about it. So I do have the interface. Sony's interface is always very close to stock Android. And even though this is just a Snapdragon 650, it's very responsive. In day-to-day usage, you're not going to notice a difference between, let's say, the Snapdragon 810 of the Xperia Z5. And I'll show you a quick example of that. So just opening up the app drawer, for example, going into the camera app. Take a picture. So actually, tiny bit faster there. I'll have a more in-depth video of that later, but again, the performance is pretty good. The 13 megapixel front-facing camera is also excellent. Big improvement over the Z5's 5 megapixel camera. Now the rear-facing camera, I said, is 23 megapixels. It's pretty similar to the one on the Z5. I think that has certain strengths and disadvantages. Now even though I don't feel that the camera is better than the one on the Z5, I'm still going to count this as a positive because I feel it's one of the best cameras on the market. Now another thing, this is a bit subjective. So with the Z5 series, you use frosted glass on the back, whereas this is a metal design. Now personally, I prefer the metal just because you can't break it like you can with the glass. But another thing, and this is not as subjective in my opinion, it's definitely more comfortable to hold just because of the glass here. So you notice that on the Z5, the glass is not curved, but on the X it is. Same with on the back. Not quite as rectangular, so just more comfortable to hold. And then finally, I also have the dual front-facing speakers on this. It's a staple of Sony phones now, but it is one of the only phones on the market that you still find dual front-facing speakers. So now let's get into things I don't like about it. For one, there's no waterproofing on this phone. Now the upcoming X Performance will have waterproofing, but I'm not sure why they left it out of this one. Because in the past, the mid-rangers usually had waterproofing, like the M5 last year. So I'm not sure why they did that. Waterproofing is always a great feature on Sony phones and one of my favorite features. Now for the camera, there's actually no 4K mode on this. And for someone like myself who loves filming, that's a huge disadvantage. The reason why I believe they took it out is because it overheats. So if you record in full HD 60 frames per second, it's going to overheat and crash after around 20 minutes. I did an overheating test with the Z5, and this one lasted about 50 minutes in 4K mode, whereas this one only lasts around 22 minutes shooting in 1080p. So for me, that's a big drawback for the phone. I also don't like how this phone is lacking in standout features that are in a lot of the 2016 models. For example, on the Galaxy S7 Edge, this has an excellent always-on display. Really love this feature, and I wish it was in all smartphones. It also has quick charge 2.0 instead of 3.0, and it does not have USB Type-C. Now the next thing I don't like about the phone is a Snapdragon 650. And as I already stated, in day-to-day activities, you're not going to notice much of a difference with the high-end processors. But still, considering the price, I would expect to have a better processor. If you're into games, for example, you're not going to get as good performance on this. And so that leads me into the next thing, and the big point in this review, which is the price. So if you're going to take one thing away from this review, let it be this. Now I'm showing you the Amazon US website. You see I have the Xperia Z5 here. You can buy it for $540 brand new. And then I have the Xperia X. And it's available for pre-order $550, so $10 more. And the thing is, quite simply, the Xperia Z5 is better than the Xperia X. So why would you buy the Xperia X for $10 more, or even more depending on your region? So again, the things that the X does better than the Z5, it has a 13 megapixel front-facing camera versus 5 on the Z5. I do like the curved design on the front, the glass. I do like the metal back, although some people may prefer the glass on the Z5. So it does have a new feature on the rear-facing camera called Predictive Hybrid Autofocus, and the focus is very good on it. However, I think that still the cameras are still a wash, and that's because there's certain things that are better about it, certain things that are worse. So at nighttime, for example, the ISO rating was greatly reduced. And on the Z5, I think that it's a little bit too bright at night. It's a little bit unnatural because the scenes are generally so bright. And they reduce it on the X, but still the quality of the picture, quality of the video isn't really much better. And then also on the X, sometimes in the background of images and videos, the camera is a little bit blurry. And then I also feel that the steady shot is a little bit more jittery overall. But overall, the main thing to take away from this is that the cameras are very similar, just with a few minor differences in terms of software. And I'll actually do a full camera review at some point, full camera comparison, but I already have a bunch of those videos on my channel. And then finally, it has something called adaptive charging technology, and this is supposed to preserve the battery life of the phone over time. But now let's get into things that are better on the Z5. So on the Z5, you don't have to worry about an overheating camera. You can record videos in 4K mode. It has a Snapdragon 810, which is of course better than the 650. It does have waterproofing. The screen size is slightly larger at 5.2 inches versus 5.0 on the X. And the battery is also better at 2900 versus 2620. So really what it all comes down to is the X has a better front-facing camera and a very slightly better design that you probably won't even realize if you have a case on the phone. Whereas the Z5 has a lot more standout features. So guys, again, in the US it's only a $10 difference. The X is only $10 more expensive, but in other regions it's even more than that. And I personally think that this phone, the X, should be around $50 to $100 less than the Xperia Z5. And the Xperia Z5 pretty much has all the features that the X has, but doesn't have issues like overheating. So yeah guys, I'm definitely going to say, if you don't already own one of these phones, go with the Z5. If you do own the Z5, there's absolutely no reason to get the X. Maybe the X Performance, which is coming out in a couple weeks. That has a Snapdragon 820, so obviously a huge improvement there, and also has waterproofing. Now, if you're watching this video, let's say several months out from now, and there's been some price drops on the X, then don't get me wrong, the X is still a good phone, it's just not as good as the prices. So please subscribe if you aren't already. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos with the X, a lot of comparisons versus the Z5 and a bunch of other phones. I also plan on buying the X Performance, the XA, the XA Ultra, and the E5 as soon as they come out, as well as all major smartphones from other manufacturers. Thanks again guys, and let me know what video you want to see next.